She said, I begged him, don't shoot me, don't shoot me, don't shoot me, and he shot me anyway. This is things that are never supposed to happen.
A husband shoots his wife dead and guns down his 13-year-old stepdaughter after an argument over a Monday Night Football game. But the evidence left behind paints a picture of a crisis long in the making. We even uncovered cryptic messages the killer left behind in his own social media posts, some made even on the day of the murders, revealing his own chilling thoughts about his own family. We're looking at how an argument over a football game erupted into such deadly violence just days before Christmas. We're on the case, presented by Law & Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. An important tool for us here at Law & Crime is Truth Finder. It's a powerful public records search service that we use to do research on the people involved in our stories. You plug in a name and you can get address information, criminal history, and more, and it can give you some peace of mind, even if you don't work in true crime. Truth Finder is one of the largest public records search services in the US, and with a paid subscription, you get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone, including registered sex offenders in your area, which can be very important. Stay informed, stay safe. Check public records with Truth Finder now at truthfinder.com/OTC.
How does an argument over a television program end up with a murder, an attempted murder?
That is the question from a Florida sheriff just days before Christmas. The answer is a story that starts with a Monday Night Football game and ends with a handwritten cry for help. A mom is dead, a 13-year-old girl is shot in the face, and a 12-year-old boy is running for his life, and the man police say did it had already told the world what he believed was happening inside his home. Just hours before the shooting, he posted a message online about, quote, spiritual warfare, about losing control, about Satan, quote, wanting his wife. Then came the gunshots. We're going to look at how it escalated and ended in such a violent way. Well, this story is about something that so many of us just experienced. Well, the good part of it. That feeling of just being days before Christmas when gifts are wrapped, lights are twinkling. That's the scene that detectives walked into at a home in Lakeland, Florida. But just hours earlier, that same peaceful living room was the starting point for a horror that no one saw coming. It all began with, of all things, a football game. Monday Night Football, a win for the San Francisco 49ers. Sheriff Grady Judd set the scene.
Jason Kinney, who's 47, is married to Crystal Kinney. And Jason's been drinking during the evening. And he's watching his football team, the 49ers, play football. Well, they're having a good night. They're winning. In fact, they won big. Sometime toward the end of the game, at around 11 o'clock, an argument began when Crystal suggested they watch something else on television. And the argument got really heated.
Now, heated, it's putting it mildly. It was a fight that exploded. Police say that Crystal did the only thing she could think to do. She told her 12-year-old son to get out, to run to the neighbor's house, and to call 911.
Crystal told her 12-year-old son to go to call 911. So the 12-year-old flees to the neighbor's house in order to dial 911, and as he's leaving the house, he hears a gunshot.
That first gunshot, deputies got there in under 5 minutes, but what they found inside, it's the kind of thing that just sticks with you.
We see that Crystal Kinney, the wife of Jason, is shot in the head and dead. But it gets worse. We go into the bedroom and we see a 13-year-old child, a little girl. She's shot twice. She's shot in the shoulder and she's shot in the face. We later learned the bullet in the face hit her on the bridge of the nose, went straight up and out the top of her head. She is alive in critical condition, but stable, at Lakeland Regional Health and is alert and talking. That's a Christmas miracle. Jason shot her twice and intended to kill her. She said, I begged him, don't shoot me, don't shoot me, don't shoot me, and he shot me anyway. This is things that are never supposed to happen. He didn't, however, shoot his biological child, thank God, who was 1 year old and in a crib. He shot his stepdaughter. He didn't get a chance to shoot his stepson who had run to dial 911.
So in a matter of minutes, a family home became a crime scene. A mom is dead, a teenage girl clinging to life, an infant is found unharmed in a crib, and the 12-year-old boy who made the call is safe at a neighbor's house, at least physically safe. You can't imagine what is going through his mind. But the man who police say did it, Jason Kenney, is nowhere to be found. He had already fled. He ran from his family after what he allegedly did. And on his way out of town, they say he makes a phone call that reveals his state of mind.
He is going toward Lake Wales. He calls his sister in upstate New York, and he says, I've done something very, very bad. Very bad. I did something terrible. And this is the last time you'll ever talk to me. You'll see me on the news, but I am not going to jail. I'm not going to jail for the rest of my life. So he goes to his father's house, which apparently is currently in probate. His father's deceased, and there's a friend staying there. When he gets to the house, he immediately goes into a shed. Deputies now are tracking Jason. We set up a perimeter and start yelling for Jason to come out of this shed, which is adjacent to the home.
They had him cornered, but Jason Kenney would never be taken into custody. He would never sit in a patrol car, never be booked into jail, never stand before a judge, never have to face his family for what he did. What happened in that shed would ensure that. Now, we'll come back to those final moments in just a bit here, but I first want you to understand that what happened here, we have to go back. And it's not to the shed, and it's not even the day that all of this happened, but it's going back to the house. Because while deputies were trying to get Jason to come out, other investigators made a discovery at the family home because there was a clue that really was left in plain sight. Not a weapon, it was a note.
We found a note that at some time in the past Crystal wrote, and it was open, where she told Jason, you know, you're drinking, you're using cocaine again. This is not the way the family should be. You need God.
You need God. This wasn't hidden. It was left out, left for him, or maybe for anyone to see. A cry for help and a diagnosis of a sickness in their home, long before the first bullet was fired. This note is the through line. It's what takes this shocking story from a shocking crime to really just a heartbreaking tragedy. So the question becomes, what was life like inside that house leading up to that note? What were the signs that pointed toward this end? Now we'll get to what we uncovered when we looked at his social media in just a moment. But first we have to go back to the shed in Lake Wales, Florida, where we left Jason Kenney, barricaded inside, surrounded by deputies. They were calling for him to come out, but based on his phone call to his sister, his mind was already made up. He had vowed that he would never go to jail, never have to face consequences for what he did to his own family. And in that shed, Sheriff Grady Judd said that he made sure of it, firing a single gunshot from inside the shed. When law enforcement made entry, they found Jason Kenney dead from a gunshot wound to the head. In a legal sense, this case was over. But the why in this case, that was not done. And to try to understand that, we took a look back online at what Jason Kenney had been telling the world about his marriage, his family, and what he believed he was fighting against. Now, Jason Kenney's Facebook is a public diary, and in the hours and months leading up to that night, the posts create somewhat of a conflicting portrait, because on the one hand, you see a seemingly devoted husband, but just over a year before the murder, he posts this for Crystal's birthday, writing, quote, "Happy birthday to my love, my best friend, and soon-to-be wife. Thank God I have you." He calls her the best mom he knows, a true patriot, raising kids with godly values, a firm hand, and the most love I've seen in a person. Crystal, I'm truly proud to know you and can't wait to marry you. Yet you scroll forward to the very day of the shooting, December 22nd. I mean, just days before Christmas. The timeline gets chilling. At 1:54 in the afternoon, roughly 9 hours before the argument over the TV would begin, he tags his wife Crystal in this video. The caption is a stark warning about spiritual warfare. Quote, Satan wants your wife. I always tell men, if they don't lead their family, Satan will. He adds a single heart emoji. Then just over 2 hours later at 4:22 p.m., his focus publicly pivots. He posts a lighthearted meme of old people dancing with the caption, mood knowing the 49ers play tonight. This is the same Jason who would soon be drinking hours before tragedy would strike. Join us now to talk more about this case, retired Detective Commander Will Svilar with the Chicago Police Department. Thank you, as always, for being with us on Law and Crime. What a mess, this man appears to have been for a lot of reasons. The headline that this story really grabbed was he's drunk, Monday Night Football, gets into an argument with his wife, and he just goes off. But then you start digging into his past a bit, and it seems like there's a little bit more there. What stood out to you?
I mean, you talk about Monday Night Football, I guess it's a good way to start a story, but there's no way that this started on Monday night because he got angry over a football game. This is something that's going way back. This is building up. This is, for whatever reason, he reached a breaking point. Now, I say this all the time, and we've talked about this before. Alcohol and firearms do not mix, ever. And when you get emotions involved with this and the gun's handy and there's the altered state, stuff like this happens.
Yeah, and it's just awful. And yeah, I mean, maybe that was the kind of the spark, I guess, but it was, the pile of kindling was already there. That there was something going on, because you see too from his social media, you have this on one aspect, he's this loving husband, but then there's some other stuff where it seems like there's some sort of religious, Satan references that are going on there. It's unclear what type of history of domestic violence was in the home prior to this happening, but what about his profile, the social media posts, kind of factor into what we see leading up to what happened on that Monday night?
Well, you talk about these satanic references and the religious references, so now you're going to add another factor into this besides the alcohol and the firearms. There's mental health issues possibly, all those things together aren't good. So I think you kind of see a pattern of this antisocial, this kind of the religious and the satanic thing. Maybe this guy's got some mental health issues as well. Not maybe. He definitely had some.
For law enforcement, you're called to this scene. You have a woman who's been shot dead. Gosh, the stepdaughter, she has also been shot dead. She was shot in the face and is clinging to life. And then you have a boy who was able to run to safety. You're responding to this scene. What do you do?
Well, you got to clear the place. You got to make sure that you're safe, and then you take care of the surviving victim. You do whatever you can to aid that injured victim, get them the help they need, and then you got to try to figure out where the threat is. And you could probably get a little information from the boy. Obviously, nothing from the girl. She's too badly injured. But you aid the injured, you clear the place, you make sure that everybody else is safe, and then you try to find that threat.
And in this case, they're able to track him to this shed where he ends up, according to law enforcement, taking his life. What are those moments like? You have this person that just did something horrific. Clearly, when he is arrested, if he were to be arrested, he's not going to see the light of day ever again. I don't think that there was any coaxing for him to come out of the shed other than the way that he was carried out. But I guess, how do you handle those situations when you're trying to take someone into custody like that?
The buzzwords and the keywords you hear nowadays are de-escalation and words like that. But in a situation like this, you're right. He's got absolutely nothing to lose. There's no way this guy's going to come out peacefully. You have to approach that in that manner. Like, this guy is willing to take his own life. He took his family's life. He's willing to take law enforcement's life. No question about it. So as much as you'd like to de-escalate and you'd like the situation to come out where no one else gets hurt, that's totally up to him.
Yeah, and it's, I'm sure, a scary situation for law enforcement because you are dealing with someone who's got nothing to lose, and he could, I know the term like suicide by cop, like that's something that I'm sure you have to prepare for as well. For this family, there's probably so many whys that they're always going to have, and a lot of those will be unanswered. I mean, from an investigative standpoint, the guy who did it is dead. Like what happens next? I mean, we're talking about it, but I mean, if you're, a sheriff's office in Florida, what happens next, even knowing that this guy took his own life?
So you're absolutely right. Once the law enforcement, once the smoke clears and we see what happens, there is no, obviously, prosecution involved, but there's still an investigation because you want to try to get to the bottom of why these things happened. Now, when you're talking about law enforcement, when you're talking about the whys, what led up to this, what could have been prevented, as far as law enforcement is concerned, in a case where you're just investigating a murder and a suicide, the whys don't come into it much. But as a society and as a people and as a community, we got to try to figure out what's feeding all this, what's causing this anger, what's causing this rage, so maybe we can take steps to intervene. And I'm talking about gun laws too. If you have issues of mental illness, and I believe your social media should be part of this too. Now again, I'm not trying to go against First Amendment rights or anything like that, but if you're displaying antisocial behavior, if you're displaying behavior that suggests perhaps violence, then maybe we should revisit your ability to possess a firearm.
Right, and I know, listen, I mean, it's not really, I don't feel like it's a Second Amendment comment to say like a guy who is drunk has had, apparently from social media comments, a history with cocaine. He's making statements that his wife is wanted by Satan, which is just bizarre and concerning to say the least. And then you add in that he's got access to a gun. I mean, it just feels like the last person that you would want to be in the proximity of who's armed.
And you're right. And you're talking about, when I talk about First Amendment, I mean your right to say whatever you want, your free speech and things like that. Now you're talking about First and Second Amendments, and where do we put a line? Where do we say, because you're saying these things, which you are entitled to say, are you also allowed to possess a firearm legally? I mean, it's a tightrope we have to walk, but it's something we have to address.
In your experience in Chicago, when it came to responding to domestic violence incidents like this, and I feel like there's oftentimes you get calls about stuff like this. I mean, I'm sure it's not the first time a call's been made during a Monday Night Football game for a domestic violence case that doesn't end in something like this, or a domestic dispute in some ways. I mean, sadly, what's the difference, do you feel, between something escalating to this horror show that played out in Florida compared to something that can be solved in a way where someone's not losing their life?
Well, again, domestic disturbances are what they are. They're very volatile situations, and they're for a variety of reasons. In this case, it wasn't just one reason. It wasn't just the alcohol. It wasn't just the football game. It wasn't just, obviously there's mental health issues, but when we go to domestic, and many times it's everybody gets into an argument, but nobody really has that much animosity or anger towards each other, and you can resolve those situations by separating people. Go sleep it off at your mom's house or whatever. But this is different. This is a situation where you have to read these when you come in. You have to take a look around the house. You have to talk to other people in the house if you can to see if this is something that happens all the time. When you go to a domestic violence call, you'll get feedback from the dispatcher saying, this is our fourth time here. So you get a little bit of information when you go in. Also, back a few years back, in Chicago, you could not have a firearm if you weren't a police officer. You couldn't register a handgun in the city of Chicago for years and years. That has passed. Then they had registration for handguns. So you would get information if this person was a CCL or had registered firearms in the house. Now the registration requirement's gone, so you really don't know. So all these things when you go into domestic, if you've never been to the house before, if it's your beat and you've been there several times, you have an idea what's going on in there. Is this just another intoxication issue, or is there more going on? So the more information you have going in, the safer you are coming out.
How common is it, do you see, because he has posts, talking about how much he loves his wife and she's the best and all of these things. I mean, certainly there were some posts where he said like Satan wanted her, which is the concerning part of it. But even like for some of these domestic cases where someone ends up being, he posted something, he was excited about the Niner game, hours before, where it seemed like things were going good. And then suddenly you find yourself at the end of the night, you're talking about this guy being an absolute monster. I guess how common is it you see that kind of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde part of it in some of these domestic violence cases?
You see it not only in domestic violence cases, but you see, and I'm no psychologist, I'm no psychiatrist, I'm no expert in the field, but you see clearly there's mental health issues there. There's highs, there's lows, there's good guys, bad guys. Like I said, I'm not a psychiatrist, but that's not normal behavior. So you'll see that where, and again, you respond to domestic and the house is torn up and someone comes to the door and says, hey, how you doing? Nothing, everything's fine. You see that quite often, and that's mental health.
And how is it, I mean, for police, and I feel like it's such an impossible position to be in, but it's like, and this is such a different situation, but it's like Gabby Petito, there was that story where it was in Bryan Laundrie, they had some sort of dispute in Moab, Utah, and then the officer, ends up, we've all seen the body camera video, and then they separate them and they go home. I'm sure for, in how many calls that you responded to in your career where you have this interaction, you got to make this judgment call. And we don't know what type of interaction they had in the past or whether this was something that was truly first interaction they've ever had with law enforcement on something like this. But it's like, how do you go into these calls before they end up being something like this? And I guess leave feeling confident about the decision you've made, that it's like, hey, these are actually just people that got into it, or it was something that, could be very serious.
Very, very good question, and very difficult to gauge that. When you go in, I mean, and the laws have been changed for domestic violence now, and it was, before it was, yeah, we can separate them or whatever. If they don't want to press charges, we're leaving. Now it's not like that. Now it's, if you go in and you notice that there's any kind of abuse or any evidence that somebody was struck, you don't need the other party to file a complaint. You take the other person. Arrest is automatic. Law enforcement, an arrest, moving somebody out of the situation, taking them to jail, is the easiest and cleanest thing to do. It's also difficult, because a lot of times, once you get there, there's so many different emotions involved with both parties, okay? There's kids, they don't want you to take dad, they don't want you to take mom. It's a very tough thing to get into, but the law kind of made it easier on law enforcement, saying if there's abuse, you take them, and you don't need to sign complaint by the victim rather.
In this case, the dad, I think it's pretty clear, or at least, to the outside, right? Like pretty clear that he was the one fired the shots. He then takes his life. You have the voicemail to his sister saying that he's done something terrible and he's never gonna, face the consequences for it and all of this. Even with that, like what type of investigation is done to be 110% sure that that's what happened here? Because obviously in hindsight, we look at all of this and we know that this is what happened, but what type of work actually goes in, even when you know that it's going to be something like this, it's a resolved, and I hate using that word, but like resolved, isolated incident, as opposed to it being something far scarier than that?
Well, to get to the conclusion of this case, again, like we said, there's no prosecution, so you don't worry about preparing anything for court, but you do the exact same investigation as if you were prosecuting an offender. You're going to do ballistics. You're going to do gunshot residue. You're going to do all the physical evidence is going to be processed, and you're going to do your interviews. And you're going to talk to the little boy. You're going to talk to, if you can't talk to the girl by the time she gets better. This case isn't closed until everybody is interviewed and all that forensic evidence comes back. You do it just like it's an active investigation. You don't take any shortcuts.
When it comes to a mental illness type situation, you also reportedly had issues in the past with cocaine. So we're not just talking about someone who might have been an alcoholic or have issues with alcohol and rage and anger. How does, and this is more generally speaking to some of these domestic calls that police will come upon, and sadly stories like this, do you see the impact of illegal substances like this having, beyond just the alcohol and watching football and all of that, but then you add in the fact that this was a guy in the past that did something more than just, having drinks or getting drunk. This was a guy who had done cocaine.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Obviously, cocaine will make you more aggressive. And that's a question you ask when you get to the house and you speak to the complainant or you speak to a witness. Are there any drugs in this house? Is there a history of drug use in this house? Has he used any drugs today, or she used any drugs today? Are drugs a part of this? And we talk about, and again, I don't want to lump everything together, but you talk about alcohol, you talk about any controlled substance, you're talking about an altering substance. So you want to know about any and all altering substances. Alcohol, cocaine, heroin, whatever it is, you want to know about this person's state. Because obviously, if you're under the influence of all these things, you're not going to be thinking too clearly.
No, and in this case, the headline that made kind of national news with it was, it was an argument on Monday Night Football, but clearly there was a lot more going on with this guy. And sadly, his wife is dead, stepdaughter seriously injured, and then you just think of the trauma for the 12-year-old boy who had to run for his life. I mean, it's just a horrific case that happened just a couple days before Christmas. Retired Detective Commander Will Svilar, it's always great to have you on Law and Crime to help us kind of break down these situations, because I know, domestic violence is something, in this case, very, very sad ending, but you hope in the future that cases like this can be prevented.
My pleasure, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.